Happy Monday. How you guys doing? Hope you had a great weekend. If your immunity feels off, your gut might be to blame. Around 70% of your immune system actually resides in your gut, making it a central player in how your body defends itself. Functional lab tests gives us a deeper look beyond standard blood work, revealing hidden imbalances in gut bacteria, inflammation, and digestive function that traditional tests often miss. This includes a stool test. These tests enable us to identify the root causes of immune dysfunction and chronic illnesses by examining the gut microbiome and its influence on immune health. And knowing what you're looking for can be confusing, and that's why we're so glad to chat on IG Live today with Marla Pietruszko, a homeopathic practitioner and a holistic nutritionist. During this live, we're going to discuss the gut immune connection, how gut imbalances can result in chronic illness, Marla's private testing, and so much more. Hi, so Marla. Here you are. Hi, Marla.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining, and then sorry for sending all the questions and everything late, but I'm so
Oh,
glad
good.
you were able to make it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited.
Yeah. Before we start, tell us a little bit about yourself and then how you became a homeopathic and practitioner and a holistic nutritionist.
Yeah, I mean it's a long story, so I'll keep it brief for time, but it started off where many years ago, over a decade, I had quite a lot of health issues, a lot of gut issues, IBS, borderline IBD, celiac, and I also had psoriasis, eczema. So a couple health issues, mold toxicity. I had gone through every channel possible in allopathic medicine and I just wasn't getting relief. And so that's where I turned to holistic medicine. And when it reversed every health issue. And when I saw that, I was blown away. And so I went to school for it. I was like, I have to help others, get these results as well. So I went to school, got my holistic nutrition diploma. Then I went back to school for homeopathy and started my own practice a little bit later. And yeah, so that's kind of how I got here. I think my love for like helping others with chronic illness, especially, was because I went through it myself. And so that's where I was like, you can't. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. You can improve your health issues and reverse them. And so yeah, that's what brought me here.
That's incredible because there's so many of the condition that you described, they're like debilitating, and then they're like really impact your day in and day out, like your life, your quality of life, and even people around you. It's just so important to get it addressed.
Absolutely.
Your bio states that you combine the best of science and immunology with the wisdom of traditional medicine and homeopathy. Like, what does that mean to you?
Yes. I mean, I would say like I'm a perpetual student. So before I went to become a holistic nutritionist and homeopath, before that I got my degree in biological sciences and chemistry. And that I always had a love for science. So that kind of gave me um really, I don't know, just like this fire to learn more on how our body functions at the cellular level. So after I went from getting my university degree, I went and got the holistic and natural side, but then I continued on from there. I really loved like learning more about immunology specifically. So I've still been studying, but I've been for the past 6.5 years doing really intensive immunology training and studies, which has then given me, I would say, a pretty good um, overall understanding of both how to come at disease from understanding the physiology and immunology, right? Like the scientific side of it, but then also using ancient wisdom and holistic health to just bring it all together. And I do feel like it's nice to have that approach from both sides rather than just one side, because then you get the best of both worlds. So that's
Absolutely. I felt like the prior part, the scientific part, the cellular level, it's really like it just a lot of time it's deduction. And then oftentimes when people are so into it, you kind of miss the big picture. And then the
okay.
holistic side to kind of like bring in the big picture. Not only you need to understand the nitty gritty how your cell works, but you actually see the whole picture that you're not just like fixing one piece, but
Exactly.
about other piece.
Absolutely.
I love it. I love it. So today we're talking about gut tests and immune health and chronic illnesses. So let's start like the beginning. So what are some signs that your immune system may need some support?
Okay, so this is vastly different for everyone. And if we're looking at homeopathy, one of the things that we talk about a lot is our vital force. Some individuals will have a strong vital force, but still have chronic illness. And essentially, if you have a strong vital force, it means that your body is still trying, it has enough energy to try and rebalance itself and re-achieve that homeostasis. So you will have physical symptoms that are manifesting, and that's your body trying to fix itself. So for example, if you have toxicity in the cells, a lot of people have a lot of BPAs and phthalates and things like that. If you have a lot of toxicity and your body's trying to correct itself, it will try to push it out through the skin. And so, commonly we see eczema, acne, and these skin issues. Same thing if you have mold toxicity and these kinds of things, our body utilizes our skin as a big detox organ. So if I ever see anyone with skin issues, it's a sign that their vital force is strong. Their body is trying to rebalance. It has that strength. And so, runny nose, if someone's sneezing, if they have seasonal allergies, if you get sick frequently, these are signs that I definitely look for. But there's a lot of individuals that have no symptoms. That's usually their vital force is very weakened and it's not able to correct itself by producing symptoms anymore. And so excuse me, individuals that don't have symptoms is really where I kind of focus in on. I'm like, a lot of times stool testing, lab work will tell us a lot, but typically it's the ones that just have those long-term symptoms that we've really normalized today. So for example, just difficulty losing weight. We oftentimes will just say, oh, it's our metabolism shutting down, or I have a slow metabolism, when really it's a sign of, more deeper imbalances happening that have gone on for so long that we've just overlooked it. So definitely looking at the metabolism. If you have elevated cholesterol, if you have elevated liver enzymes, if you have excess belly fat, if you get hot flashes and night sweats outside of menopause, those are definitely things we look at. I also like to go a little bit deeper. I look at like skin color. If you have a little bit of yellowing in your eyes or your skin, if you notice, skin tags forming, really dry skin, there's really to me, the list is endless. Every symptom is showing something. And I would say that it really comes down to each person. If you have no symptoms, which a lot of times then we think we're healthy, that oftentimes we'll be like, okay, that's a flag for me. If you aren't feeling great in general, then I look at that as well. So it's hard to say for sure, but skin symptoms are one of my top.
Yeah. And I also think that that's like because skin is your largest organ, right? And then it's also like a true reflection. And I felt like it's if it's on the skin, once you detect it, it's then you can figure out a plan to address.
That's
So
right.
I love that approach. So, what role does gut play in supporting a healthy immune system?
So I think everything starts in the gut. I know you probably hear people say that a lot, but it's really true. Typically, because our gut is home to trillions and trillions of microorganisms, to 70 to 80% of our immune system and our our lymph nodes and things like that, it's home to one of our first lines of defense outside of our mouth and the IgA antibodies in our mouth, and so much more. Our neurotransmitters are produced in the gut. A lot of our B vitamins and things like that, toxins are excreted through the gut. So for me, it's things start there. If you start having just something simple, like you have a bad diet and now you have constipation, that automatically means you're not detoxing a lot of these excess hormones and chemicals and things from the body, because our liver uses our stool to excrete. If somebody has taken antibiotics, if they maybe drink a little bit of alcohol here and there, those will clear out your good organisms. And then you're left with some of those opportunistic pathogens that can overgrow. And if you have that shift, more bad than good organisms, you'll have more histamine, inflammation. So that can drive an immune imbalance. If you are just in general really stressed, maybe you eat super quick, there's a lot of things that can drive GI irritation, which can lead to leaky gut. And from there, that's where health issues will start to form. You'll start to notice once the gut's out of balance, everything else becomes affected. So your liver becomes more burdened, or your immune system becomes more fatigued and weakened. Your inflammation increases. So I think the gut is the most important thing to look at if you are looking at rebalancing the immune system, because to me, it really does start there.
Mhm. You have a great post that mentioning bacteria, parasites, and fungi that could be in your gut, and then like what's the differences between these?
Yeah. So we all have, like I said, there's trillions of organisms in our gut. We have beneficial, and then we have some pathogenic, opportunistic organisms. Um, we almost all of us are born with yeast. We're born with some of the bad stuff. However, usually because we should have a good amount of healthy organisms, it should crowd out the bad ones enough that it doesn't elicit symptoms for us. What starts to happen though is we have it are just touching on our stomach very quickly. When we eat anything or we touch something, maybe we're in a public place and then we, lick our finger, we don't wash our hands properly, we are exposed to a lot of organisms. Many are parasitic type of organisms or parasites. Those, the only way that they can die before they hit our colon is through good, healthy stomach acid levels. So a lot of people, I would say almost all of my clients that I've worked with to date have an underactive stomach because stress is really huge. We have poor vagal outflow. Most people have some level of a thyroid dysfunction, which also regulates our stomach acid. We eat too
Mhm.
quickly, etc. And so over time, if our stomach acid levels are low, we're not killing parasites that are coming into our gut. And so parasites specifically are really damaging because if they reach our colon and they're alive, they multiply quite rapidly and they really start to displace the good organisms. Parasites can utilize and steal all of our nutrients, especially our iron stores. So a lot of times people with parasites will probably have some level of anemia. They might have runny stools, probably some type of skin issue. Insomnia is oftentimes paired with that. Parasites are more active at night, so they trigger the gut at night. Yeast is more of it's another type of a parasite in the sense that it behaves similarly, where it's stealing nutrition from us. However, yeast can become systemic, so it quite literally will tear open the gut lining. And once it's in its hyphal form, which I do talk about a lot because it's really important, a lot of people are at that stage, it can pass to other parts of the body. So yeast infections are common, UTIs, toenail fungus, any type of fungal overgrowth. If you see like cradle cap on babies or scaling or dandruff in adults, that's all coming from yeast. And so that one can kind of travel throughout the entire body and create more of a histamine type of response, similar to mold. And then we have bacteria. You can have so many different types of bacteria that on their own, in a small amount, probably aren't harmful, like things like E. coli. But if they grow to a large enough amount, they can then also become quite inflammatory. So they all play their own role. At the end of the day, though, they all do elevate our histamine and our inflammation, trigger leaky gut, and steal our nutrients and cause poor breakdown of our food.
Wow. So all of these, besides these bacteria and all the symptom you have, is basically it's saying if you ignore your gut health, that could really result in some serious conditions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So like, why are you such an advocate for testing?
So I have kind of like, I have two parties, I guess. On one hand, I think people rely very heavily on testing, and then it's like depending what their results are, that's how they decide to proceed with, whatever they're going to do in terms of their health. I think that you should always take testing with a grain of salt. So I am a huge advocate for it, and I have all my clients do stool testing and different types of testing, but do understand that in general, especially if we're talking about a stool test, the results can not always be 100% accurate. So I don't personally use stool testing and we'll talk about this more as we go through the live, but I don't use stool testing as a means to tell me necessarily what pathogens are in the gut, but I look at it more to tell me what's not there, what good organisms don't we have, what neurotransmitters are we low in, what metabolites are we low in, because a lot of organisms will produce biofilms and then kind of stick to the wall of our gut, and then they just won't be in our stool sample. So they'll come out with a false negative on a stool test. So I love testing for telling me what we're missing. And that also comes to like food sensitivity testing or any antibody testing, whatever we're doing. I'm like, what are we low in? What is something that we might have to remove from our diet? Utilizing it more for that rather than as a all around tell me what to do kind of test, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And also, like, not all the tests, like none of the tests is like 100%.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
So how does you mentioned a pathogen? So how does pathogen imbalance in the gut influence, the antibodies in the gut?
Yeah. So we have specifically, and I do this with my autoimmune clients, there's a wonderful lab. I think they're one of the few that I've been able to come across that they do wonderful testing specifically for this. And they can get your antibody levels tested. So your IgA, IgG, IgE, and IgM. And those are different antibodies, four of them that we'll find in the gut. Typically, in like a really healthy individual with good gut health, so a good balance of good organisms to bad, you should have really healthy levels of your IgA specifically. This is one of my favorite antibodies in terms of like chronic illness. Anyone who has chronic illness typically has low IgA. It is our first line of defense in our mucosal membrane, so in our mouth, in our gut, to not only keep pathogens at bay, but to keep our gut lining healthy and strong, to keep our immune system functioning really balanced, and to keep histamine low, etc. Typically, if you have chronic histamine or inflammation, IgA becomes really low and you lose your oral tolerance. Pathogens drive this because they create so much inflammation in the gut that our immune system has to work overtime and that fatigues it. And so antibodies naturally, especially IgA, will decline. And it's low and you lose your oral tolerance. That's where you form food sensitivities or food allergies. And then that can start to create issues with your diet. And so I always want to see IgA antibody at a good, healthy level. For IgE and IgG, if you see those elevated on a test, which pathogens will drive because they will cause the leaky gut, and so those food particles enter the bloodstream and it elicits a response. So when you see those levels higher, IgE and IgG, you probably have food sensitivities or allergies. And if you see IgM elevated, which is elevated in a lot of chronic illness clients, they typically have, it's a sign that there's leaky gut. So if we see IgM high, that's usually an indication of that. And one other thing I will say is, another thing is if you have a lot of pathogens in the gut, our immune system is trying to clear those out and attack them. Pathogens feed off of the food that's in our gut. So if an immune cell comes in, specifically our B cells are going to come in, they're going to take our dendritic cells and our B cells are going to take a fragment of that pathogen and present it back to the T and B cells in the lymph nodes and say, hey, like this is what's there, create your immune cells to come in and attack this. But when it takes a fragment of that, this is the immunology side of that pathogen, it's taking a fragment of food. So whatever you're eating most frequently, it's that there's going to be a sampling of that happening from our dendritic cells. So our body's not creating antibodies to the pathogens only, but also to the foods. So that's also how having too many pathogens in the gut will lead to more sampling in the gut, which means more food sensitivities forming.
Wow. That's so complicated. Like nobody ever like have explained because people just talk about food sensitivity testing, but not actually linking it to the root cause of this is also your immune antibodies.
That's right. I've had clients like when they came to work with me, they're like, I have this food sensitivity test. I cut everything out for a year. I test it again, and the same sensitivities are there. And immediately I'm like, did you do a pathogen cleanse? Did you get it? If not, the sampling is still there. You're just going to expand your list of things you can't eat until the pathogens are gone to lower the sampling.
Yeah. This is also to your point that, one test is not 100%. You really need to understand immunology, like the whole comprehensive stuff. And then also back to your point about understanding the cellular level, but also the holistic level of things so you can actually fix it.
That's great. Yes.
Yeah, I love it. Dr. Keisha just asked a question. What if someone has high IgA antibodies?
Yeah, so that's commonly seen. It can go the other way. You don't want too high. If your antibodies are your IgA is too high, which can happen, and especially in autoimmune, that means there is too much attacking in the gut, too much immune activity. So that can drive your illnesses like Crohn's disease. Essentially, you don't want too much immune activity in the gut, or you get more gut damage. Again, more sampling, more food sensitivities, more allergies. So it can go the other way. If somebody has levels that are too high in the colon, that is strictly coming from an immune imbalance. It can get quite complicated, and I don't want to like take a ton of time talking about this, but we have different immune cells like Th1, Th2, Th17. They will produce different immune cells and antibodies and cytokines depending on what's happening in the body. If IgA gets too high, oftentimes there's a Th2 and Th17 dominance, which means you're producing a lot of inflammatory cytokines localized to the gut. And so there's going to be a lot more gut activity. So in that case, you would want to lower your IgA antibodies. But oftentimes, if you clear the gut, lower inflammation, clear pathogens, that comes back down to normal range.
So earlier you also mentioned a food sensitivity. So what is food sensitivity and, gluten cross reactor test?
I so I'm not affiliated with this lab. It's just the one that I use most often for my clients because I do think they're superior. There's a lab in the US. They do also, if you're Canadian, you can use this one. It's Cyrex Labs. I like this lab because they use the array that they do for food sensitivities and gluten cross reactors, which I'll explain shortly what that is. They use very hypersensitive testing. They use the ELISA panel. And more importantly, they're testing food sensitivities in the way that you would genuinely eat them. So if you pick a random food sensitivity test off the internet and just order one yourself, it might be okay, but you're probably going to be missing a lot of information because typically the average food sensitivity test will only do raw foods. So they're testing raw rice, raw potato. You don't eat rice raw, you don't eat potato raw. If you cook the potato, it changes the protein structure. So you might be able to eat a raw potato and not have a reaction, but if you eat a cooked potato, you can react to it. So Cyrex Labs, they test the foods in the way that you would actually eat them to make it way more accurate. And I did this for myself before I knew anything, I did a normal food sensitivity test. It told me I could eat raw almond. It told me I could eat raw rice, etc. When I got the Cyrex panel done, I could not have raw almond. I had to have them blanched and like kind of cooked. The rice as well. I could not have cooked rice, but I could have raw, which I'm not eating. Oh, I should be removing all of these foods. Um, so yeah, food sensitivity panel is super important. If you have constant inflammation, it needs to be done. In my opinion, remove the foods temporarily. This isn't to remove them forever, but it's to just stop one less assault on the gut, give your body a chance to regroup and then reintroduce. In terms of gluten cross reactors, not everybody has to be hyper aware of this. It's more for people who have celiac disease or who just are very sensitive to gluten. There are other gluten-free grains like rice, like corn, and even coffee, I believe. There's quite a big list that have a similar protein structure to gluten. So if you are very sensitive, you could be cutting out gluten and still feeling off. And you're probably reacting to things like the rice and millet and those other grains that have a similar structure, and your body is not differentiating. So there is not a lot of companies do this, but Cyrex Labs as well. They do gluten cross reactor testing. So I do order that for clients that have those really hypersensitive cases. And I'm like, we might just need to, oftentimes there's that correlation. We just need to cut those foods out as well.
That makes so much sense. So what is the best way to determine pathogen overgrowth in the gut?
For me, this is the one where I'm actually like not necessarily testing, although I do stool testing for this, but in general, I actually do symptoms. I think that your body doesn't lie. And it's kind of like, if you were to walk into a house and you're like, I smell mold, there's a musty smell, there's a dampness in the air, and every time I come into the house, I start itching or my eyes are burning. Oftentimes, if you tell anyone that, majority of people are going to be like, it sounds like mold, maybe just get a mold test. And that's kind of how our body is too. There's just some symptoms that to me are clear as day, pathogen imbalance. If you have chronic inflammation, like no matter what, your inflammation's high, something is driving it. 80% of the histamine in our body is produced in the gut, which means there's an 80% chance that the chronic inflammation you have, it's way higher than that, but minimum 80% chance that there is pathogens in the gut that are driving it. We also have, in terms of like symptoms, skin issues, any kind of itching, we know there's, yeast involved. If there is any bowel imbalance, there's yeast involved. If there's even oftentimes like I do a lot of oral assessment too. So like plaque on the tongue, oral thrush, but cavity forming, weakened teeth, that's also huge signs. Nutrient deficiencies, difficulty sleeping, like the list is kind of endless to me. But if you're working with a practitioner who knows what to look for, it's usually to me like step one, let's go off of symptoms. If even a couple symptoms are pointing to an imbalance in the gut of pathogens, we do a pathogen cleanse. And then if you start feeling better quite quickly, we know that we're on the right track. I do stool testing with it. And I always tell my clients, take it with a grain of salt. If it comes negative for yeast, don't assume you don't have it, because there are films and you probably are just, it's not in the stool sample. If it comes negative for parasites, again, don't assume you don't have it. I would say for 99% of my chronic illness clients, we do pathogen cleansing. We assume it's present. 99.9% of the time, they feel better after we do it. So we kind of just symptoms, the stool test confirms a little bit. But always if you feel better after doing the pathogen cleanse, that's a good sign if there was overgrowth.
I know you have like so many tools in your toolbox. So what can someone learn from private testing?
So I think that every practitioner works differently. For me, it really comes down to the individual. Some clients are like, I have a child who just seems to get, hold on to their sickness for a little longer than they should. I just want like a very basic, affordable test where I could see kind of what's going on. So I'll be like, just, order like a GI map or, a basic stool test online. And that's probably sufficient. If someone is coming to me with, a laundry list of long of health issues and imbalances that they've had for a decade or more, a little stool test online is probably not going to cut it. So that's where I work with labs, where depending where they are, to get the proper testing. I do a lot of work with Cyrex labs in the US. We do order and them into Canada for Canadian clients. But it just really depends on the individual and what they need. Some labs, especially if you're in Canada, this is where the private testing will come in. It gets very expensive, but it's wonderful to have if you're able to as support. In Canada, you have to pay like $1,500 to even get a mold test, and that's if they will order it for you. Most labs are like, nope, we're not doing it. You have to beg the doctors here for a food sensitivity test, for antibody testing. So that's really where going to like a private lab or working with a different company can be more helpful. So I would just say check with your practitioner, see what will fit your symptom profile the best, and then go from there.
We also received a question offline from the fittest doc. How often do you recommend a functional gut testing for patients with unexplained immune issues?
Yes, I do it frequent. So when we start working together, I would say like, let's get some basic panels. Let's do food sensitivity. Let's do some stool testing, just see like what you're missing. We do a full comprehensive stool. So it's not just for bacteria, but for, again, metabolites, neurotransmitters. And then oftentimes if they need antibody testing and other stuff, their iron, their cholesterol, liver enzymes, that will also be done. But as we start to work together and start addressing their imbalances, I like to see that we're on the right track. So usually somewhere in the middle, it's so different for everyone, but I'll be like, let's just do a revisit and just see where we're at. And if we see like things improved on all of those tests that we just did, we continue. And then at the end, if they're feeling really, really good and they're like graduating, they're saying, I think I'm good to go on my own now. Then I'm like, let's do final panels. Let's see, make sure everything's back in order. So I would say about 3 times. Some clients just do it once, some do it twice, but I like 3 if we can.
That makes sense. Okay, thank you so much for sharing everything. The last 2 minutes we have, I want to ask, how can someone work with you?
So you can visit my website, holisticspring.com. You can contact me through there. You can see all the services that I offer, or you can message me through Instagram. I mainly specialize in skin and autoimmune diseases or like gut issues. So eczema, psoriasis, acne, and then IBS, IBD are my specialties, but I do work with other things as well, other conditions. And I do live in Canada, so I work virtually with anybody in the US. But yeah, definitely visit my website or my Instagram page and you can contact me through there.
Anything else you'd like to share?
Just that I have a podcast. It's called Holistic Living. Holistic is like holistic homeopathic, WH. And I just share a lot of information. I actually talk a lot about even things like EPA toxicity and phthalates and things like that. But it's just
We
like
love that.
Yeah, nice conversation about helping better your health and your life through holistic means. And I do share a lot of information that you might not hear just generally out there. I try to share a lot more of like the how the body functions and why things are out of balance to just give you a little bit more of an understanding of what your issues might be. So definitely check it out. And I post a new episode every week.
Awesome. We'll make sure we'll promote that too. Thank you
Thank
so
you. I
much for
appreciate it.
sharing everything today.
It was wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Until next time.
Bye.
Okay, bye.